Something's wrong with my computer. It just froze. I couldn't move my mouse. And I just realized I was cursing under my breath and I was live. I don't know for how long. G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talks After Ukraine War. Update for the 31st of December 2025. No, it's not Dave Melts Down yet. But I think that's why some people come. Alright, so yeah, good segue for Meltdown. Cope and Seethe, headline of the day. Putin is my enemy, but 2026, Satan's name, we will stop the war. Whereas Russia is not winning, but he does acknowledge that Russia is advancing, but we cannot withdraw from our territories. You're not withdrawing, you're being kicked out. It's only about it's the law! Army is also there. Where? These are not the Russian occupied regions. The ethnic Russians there. You've been waging war on them since 2014. The idea that you're a liberator, you're a oppressor. You're getting your ass kicked and you're crying. You're running to the west saying, save me from the consequences of my actions. He claims everybody wants peace, but a just peace. In other words, I want my way, everybody. I'm the Zelensky. I must have my way. But dialogue, he keeps whining about the Russians. Russia. But he acknowledges that he rejects claims that Ukraine is losing, but Russian territorial advances, citing the human cost, claiming 31,000 soldiers per month. No, that's you! He won't acknowledge that he's losing ground. If he wasn't losing soldiers, he wouldn't be losing ground. Now, 31 soldiers a month, right, is around 1,000 days, right? 1,000 days. Right? So, given 365 days, 4 years, that is nearly 1.5 million to 1.4 million, 600,000, right? 465,000 estimated dead. Given that is just the estimates, and that will vary, right? Given that that is the Ukraine side, 1,000 a month, 31,000 a month, right? That means over 2 million have died because 70% of the deaths are on Ukraine side. If they weren't, they wouldn't have a morgue with 200,000 bodies in it. They wouldn't be handing over a handful of Russian bodies every month to the Russians. They're claiming that the Russian army has stopped growing for the first time. No, it hasn't. Putin announced last month a reorganization of the Russian army. He doesn't need to grow his army every month. He's claiming 43,000 people per month. No, that's not true. The last mobilization was 160,000. But imagine claiming the Russians are sending 43,000 a month and your army of 800,000 can't beat them. Imagine how stupid you have to be to admit that to the world. But of course, how stupid do you have to be to not even recognize that Zelensky's getting his ass kicked by a smaller army? And that Zelensky has not only the might of Europe and America, but the might of America behind him. But see, Putin has also half the world on his side. The world has to destabilize because of Zelensky, who just won't get out of his own way because the Euro cunts worship the Zelensky. They put this animal in charge, so now they have to double down on stupidity because that is the nature of the liberal establishment, to always double down until broke and then blame everybody else. Now, of course, the diversity mob, the glazers of stupidity, can't understand nuance. Trump said Russia wants to see Ukraine secede. Of course, the TDS mob Putin was asked a question during the media analyzing 2025. This is where the Russian leader sits down with the media. Could you imagine that, right? Could you imagine Trump at the end, any US president, though they do have daily press briefings, but I mean the actual president on stage answering questions for the media, and if he doesn't have an answer, someone gets an answer, and it's published. Do you imagine if the West had to do that? Oh my God, we'd have far better leaders, that's for sure. We'd roast them. Now, I don't know the full context, but what I do know is a reporter asked a question, and Putin says, it's not about whether I want to see Ukraine succeed or fail. Of course I want Ukraine to succeed. It's dangerous to have a deadbeat neighbour. But of course, I don't think that was a very good translation, but since I'm not a native Russian speaker, I can't dispute the translation, but I'm sure someone will and then blame me for making stuff up. But either way, the Zelensky and his sycophants are morons. It is a little strange, and he has a strange reaction. They're saying, of course, that Trump doesn't understand the Putin. Not like me. I know the Putin because I'm the genius liberal journalist. My journalism degree says I am the expert on the everything, especially doubly the Putin. And the Zelensky, of course he's the expert on the Putin. The Putin is my enemy. And Satan willing, we will defeat the Putin. Now, of course, the Russian response has yet to come. And Zelensky says, ha! But it is. There was a drone strike. It just was not big. And then, of course, the Institute of War and others, they've got their take on the Russian attack and counterattack, and the Zelensky's attack on Putin's residence, which of course they're all denying. But they're, today we get the usual strikes on the supply. Now, I don't know what it is about this supply line that's so important that Russia has to bomb it every few days, but they do, and it happens. Same with, this is a Ukraine death trap, draw in Ukrainians, but this buffer zone is doing its job. So Putin is very happy with it, and he's actually thanked the troops for their efforts. It's rare for any leader to take time out of their day to thank the troops, Except during a campaign year, of course. And then they're kissing the troops like kissing troops and babies, you know. But the Russian death trap the Russian death trap known as Kupiansk continues. The Russians have claimed advancing and the victory here in a long... But of course the other death traps seem to be pretty quiet compared to yesterday, although there is some glide bombs and some drone strikes on Siversk and other areas. Seems to be they're stabilising the front line. That's where you make it a straight line, but actually they've broken through, but it's not a very big change to the front line. Bit of a spike. But most of the front line, of course, due to the freezing weather, is frozen. Now, Ukraine media, the Kiev Post in particular, reports shelling at the centre of Korvenskaya, yet there's no marker for it on the Ukraine map. Now, the Russians have advanced here in the south, but they're closing the gap here. It's just a straight line forward advance. They blow away some Ukrainians, jump into their trenches, and just keep doing it until you start losing men, and then you dig in and hope you do get home for New Year's. But whether or not, our troop rotations are occurring on estimate, they do not occur regularly, but at least every between 5 to 7 weeks, Russians are rotating. They rotate a few men each time, about 2 per unit. Sometimes, however, this is disruptive, but, there is a general replacement, right? Units. It's always good to keep a whole train unit together, but that's impossible in war. You do have to replace your losses. You do have to reorganize. But this is the biggest reorganization. Of course, it's going to take time, so it is slowing down the Russian advance. But they are making probing attacks into Myriad to wear down the Ukrainians, and of course, in order to keep the numbers down, the bear trap at the Provost rail station continues to do its work, although there aren't that many Ukrainians willing to spring the trap today. But there are other areas where there is combat, only a little bit of progress, but lots of strikes here on the Western Front, but that's about it. It seems to be that as soon as Russia makes a big advance, they strike out around them and they solidify their holdings, although in some areas they do make some advances. And yes, they have made some, though it looks like, they are going to encircle Omsk and break this line through flanking now that they have established multiple river crossings in the area. Now, Russia's taken 2 towns today, hit the Ukrainians on the outskirts of Zaporozhye, and hit Kharkiv, Kherson, Odessa. They love their Sumy as well, of course, but Kryvyi, who they haven't hit in a while. But of course, Ukraine has lashed out, but nothing of consequence, although, they have lashed out. Key events, that's what the weather's like. It's so cold, humidity freezes and drops as snow. Any humidity will freeze. But Russia has advanced, and ahead of that advance, Ukraine has announced civilian evacuations in Chervil. We're winning! We are so winning! We have to reposition backwards. But we are winning. More places that were out of electricity as Russia has conducted drone strikes. Now, Zelensky lashed out at countries who have condemned him about the attack on Moscow, saying, it's an alleged attack. It never happened. I never said I'd bring the terror to the Putin. I never said the Putin was my enemy, and then in Satan's name, I'll wipe him out so that we will win this war, so that we'll have a just peace, and I can drink from his skull. No, Zelensky never said that. The Institute for the Study of War, a Washington-based DNC think tank, said that, it did not match the pattern of observed evidence. You mean all the previous Ukraine drone attacks on Moscow? Somehow that didn't match all their other previous attempts, including the one that hit the Kremlin? Wow. And NATO, of course, NATO. Oh, you can trust us. We're not another terrorist organization. Said, you can trust us. It never happened. It's unclear. I didn't see it from my office in Brussels, so it didn't happen. Germany said, no, it never happened. This is just a pretext for escalation. You mean like the pretext of the protesters being ethnic Russian in 2014? You claimed it was the Putin, and that was a pretext to send in troops into Donbass? No, not that pretext. Yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Anybody who criticizes the Zelensky is sanctioned and marked for death. I mean, called a traitor to the humanities. Now, Romania has announced that they're going to spend 50 million euros to buy weapons. Oh. And of course, Russia's responded by saying they will be in range of Omsk very soon. Told you, man. I thought it was going to take a while, but no. Russia's decided the Omsk missile, the sharp, pointy stick, will be poked into the Zelensky eye. That is a very sharp and pointy stick. Man has come a long way since caveman days of sharp, pointy sticks. They build big, sharp, pointy sticks now. And high-speed pointy sticks. Nothing says I love you like sending high-speed pointy stick. All right. So Russian troops have liberated 2 communities, according to Russia, and most of the time, ta-da! Say all right, but it takes a month or two for the Zelensky to admit, we're winning! We're winning so much that we reposition over the hill. Is that, you mean west? Or that way? Or somewhere the Russians are not? Oh, but see, Zelensky, he says the Russians, they lost 31,000. Well, Kiev lost 1,300 today, yesterday, the day before that. But they also lost 200, 190, 200, 470, 210, and 40. And that's just men. In one day, not all. Remember, the estimate for the Russians is about 30% die, Ukraine about 70%, and that the casualty rate for both sides is the same. Estimate, just saying. And this is multiple agencies, including Russian bloggers who think that the odds the casualties, they are low compared to other nations and other conflicts, that this is roughly on par, right? That if Ukraine loses 1,000 men, roughly same number on the Russian side, right? There's no big tactical advantage other than the fact that the Russians tend to survive the encounters and that the Ukrainians don't. Otherwise, Russia would not be advancing. It does not take a military genius. In fact, most people would acknowledge that today there doesn't seem to be one. Okay? There hasn't been that many military geniuses in history. Right? Now, King Baldwin, with 500 knights killing 26,000 Saladin Saracens, that was military genius. Alexander flanking and performing multiple flanking maneuvers, and in under hostile conditions, able to defeat a much larger army and bring about the collapse of Persia. That was considered a military genius. Most of the generals in World War II got lucky. They were not geniuses. They just got lucky. Although it's pretty... Mannerheim, the father of the Blitzkrieg, is definitely sort of considered a military genius, although a lot of his plans didn't come to fruition. See, most geniuses only have a handful of achievements and a million failures. I think the difference is that they just keep going and eventually, I wouldn't say strike lucky. No, they eventually have something that actually worked, right? It's not that they can't come up with ideas, right? Geniuses come up with ideas all the time. But not everybody, comes up with a lot of ideas, and new ideas especially. So the genius part, however, of course, is succeeding and working out your ideas. You can have lots of ideas. Sometimes they have to be tested. Sometimes ideas can work, like the spearhead attacks that Ukraine initiated in the beginning of the war. But other times, someone comes along and figures out, spearhead comes, we clamp it, right? We open up and clamp it, right? Double, instead of having a straight line collapse, you have a straight line fold, and now you've got the rear second line and the split first line firing not in a straight line, but now flanking but at a V, so that your artillery doesn't go over, but over. So Kiev, if Kiev, with a larger army of around 800,000, was not losing, then they would not be losing territory. If Russia was losing 31,000 men a month, and Ukraine was only losing 40, and Ukraine only lost 46,000, then Ukraine would be winning and advancing. But see, there's so many, like the liar who tells them, Putin lost another tank, or we blew up an oil rig. These disasters. They don't care about Ukraine. They just want to see something Russian blow up. They get their rocks off. They're sociopaths getting their rocks off, watching war and destruction and death. And that's why this war continues, because this sociopath just sits there and goes, fuck India. What do they know? Yeah. Yeah, Zelensky, you're only the world's 134th ranked country, and India's only the 5th ranked country. I mean, India has no resources. They know nothing. But of course, he lashes out at India for claiming that Ukraine fired 91 drones, and so did the UAE and other countries, condemning the attack on Vladimir Putin's residence in Novgorod region. Now, Ukraine has attacked Novgorod multiple times. These were 31 long-range strike drones between the nights of December 28th and 29th. There were no casualties, no material damage. All UAVs, but one were intercepted. The jamming, however, worked, and the final UAV just continued on and dropped into the woods. But yes, they shot down 90 out of 91. Jamming took care of the last one before it reached its destination, long before it reached its destination. But tracking of the drone that was jammed had it in a direct line for Putin's residence. It was homing in. It wasn't like going in a straight line. It was actually homing in, right? When it was blown off, when it went off course, it tried to correct. The Russians have all the radar tracking. They've shown the Americans in India and other countries claim to have seen the evidence. And Zelensky says, never happened. They must be confused. They're unpleasant. Now, this is typical narcissist, right? Dismiss. You know, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, but China called on both sides to avoid further escalation and condemned targeting. Yeah. But again, remember this, multiple times Zelensky claimed to be under attack in Kiev when in fact he's in Poland. And everybody in Ukraine knows he's in Poland, okay? They call him the homeless president. Now, Russia's Omsk has, again, been they're talking about the Omsk in Belarus again because they claim that Poland is going to exit from the EU and attack Belarus on its own, or at least with Romania, so they can go to war with Russia. And this is now circulating that there are... sorry, just had my cable junction box fall over. I don't know why, but if it had pulled out, that's my microphone's plugged into it, so yeah, I would have gone mute. Now to Zelensky, whether or not it's true, people have said that these Polish patriots or whatever, and other people are condemning them as far right. And, well, it's a left-wing group linked to Ukraine and pro-Ukrainians in Poland. So, but I don't know if it's official yet. I think it may be another Euro pressure campaign on Poland to step up, or actually, because Donald Tusk isn't standing up for Poland. He's standing up for Ukraine, not Poland. But he is resisting, still managing to resist the push for Poland to take in refugees. But of course, if Poland breaks off and goes to war with Russia to enter Ukraine, and then, this is the provocation, right? They're trying to provoke Putin to attack Poland while the US troops are still stationed there. This is the reality, right? That, fool me once, but BRICS' response is that they're building a multipolar world, that they're not going to give in to Europe's, that they have a partnership with Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Nigeria, and Uganda. More countries, BRICS is growing, and the bloc will soon include Indonesia. Now, a lot of these are just fair weather friends. I mean, after all, when there was a trade dispute with China, Vietnam went to the US for help. When there was a territorial dispute between China and Vietnam, Vietnam did not go to Russia, but to America for help. When the Asian nations, particularly Malaysia, had problems with Chinese gangs, they turned to US law enforcement for help. BRICS, however, still does represent a shift in the economy and political hegemony. But of course, you've got to realize that China wants political hegemony, not a multipolar world, and that BRICS is nothing more than cope by Russia believing that it can achieve some sort of independence. I mean, every nation, to some extent, wants political independence. But if you really want independence, you have to be able to stand up to every other country in the world and say, we're not taking your fucking refugees. Fucking solve your own fucking problems. But it doesn't happen. Most of the world is full of, maybe we might do it there. What does the poll say? Can we divvy up, meet halfway? Pragmatists and cowards and bullies, right? Every day, China is trying to pressure Taiwan. North Korea is trying to pressure South Korea. Russia is pressuring Ukraine. Ukraine is trying to pressure Russia and has been for over 10 years now. Ukraine has reached into everybody's pocket, and now they're trying to shame you. That you have to believe the Zelensky, have to hate the Trump, yet at the same time they're begging Trump, do as we say and we will like you. No, that is not journalism. That is bullying. And, of course, it's falling apart. Ukraine is a proxy war for the Eurofash, the digital ID, jab, you'll own nothing and eat the bugs. And they are pretty much losing their minds, as well as their collective souls, as well as their collective nations. This is all a distraction from their own destructive, failed policies. This is the problem. Countries rack up huge debt. People turn a blind eye. And then suddenly when the economy collapses, they say, it must be Trump's fault, They got away with it with the Great Depression. They got away with it with the financial crisis. But I think this time people are wising up and saying, no, we don't want your phony crashes. No more bailouts for the banks. No more austerity. Close the Fed. Stop bailing them out. Start jailing people. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, or in my profile. You can scan, or, of course, you can scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.